Good evening, everyone. This is Pete Eberle with the Colorado Renewable Energy Society, CRES. And as always, want to thank you all for joining us here tonight with this strange, I'm not sure what time it is with the change in time. It's 7 o'clock, I guess, but it's 6. In any case, for those of you that are new to CRES, CRES and its local chapters provide education, policy advocacy, and community engagement that help accelerate Colorado towards a carbon neutral future powered by 100% renewable energy. Founded in 1996, CRES is a statewide 501c3 nonpartisan nonprofit that is supported by our sustaining individual members, our business sponsors, as well as donations. You can sign up for our newsletter, event announcements, social media, and become a member or donor at crest-energy.org. Although I will be shamelessly sending a link to our Colorado Gives Day after in the follow-up emails because that's our big fundraising tool for the end of the year. Also, make sure to visit our YouTube channel where you will find this presentation when it's edited, along with 295 previously recorded presentations, and contribute to our 1.45 million views. Special thanks to our business sponsors. We have Poudre Valley REA, Sinton Instruments, Platte River Power Authority, Solaris Energy, Sandbox Solar, Greystone Technology, and BrightSense Energy. Couple quick upcoming events. We have Powering the Block, neighborhood scale electrification in Denver. That'll be on Thursday, November 20th, 6:30 p.m. at the Odell Five Points Tap Room in Denver. That's hosted by our Metro Denver chapter, MD-CRES. And it'll feature a group of grad students from CU Boulder's Master of the Environment program and their project looking at neighborhood scale electrification in Denver. We then have How Solar and Agriculture Can Coexist and Thrive. That'll be Tuesday, December the 2nd, 7 p.m. at the Jefferson Unitarian Church in Golden with our Jefferson County chapter. That'll feature Sam Anderson with the Colorado Department of Agriculture. Also on Tuesday the 2nd, if you're up here in Northern Colorado, NCRES, Colorado Green Building Guild, and our friends at Green Drinks are hosting a holiday party at Odell's at the Odell Brewery up here in Fort Collins. That'll be at 5:30 p.m. And as always, all of our events are at crest-energy.org, CRES-energy.org. So without further ado, I'll hand it off to Karl.
Thanks, Peter. All right, I'm going to get rid of the frog in my throat here. And thank you, everyone, for joining in. I'm going to geek out a little bit here and take you through some of the stuff we're dealing with on trying to value distributed energy resources. I will tell you that it is not a completely objective discussion. As much as we might try for that, or as much as we might leave ourselves open to an open discussion, everybody knows that if it comes out one way, it means one thing. If it comes out another way, it means another thing. And what the Yogi Berra must have said, you know, where you stand depends on where you sit. So let's get into it and think about what we can get out of DERs and valuing these resources right. Now, by the way, I'm saying DERs over and over again, so let me get the definition straight. Distributed energy resources. I'm going to talk about what those are. A group of us who just launched a really fascinating new group called Common Charge, and I encourage you to look up, not now, commoncharge.org. If you're in a position to join or become a supporter, please do, because we think distributed energy resources have value that's undervalued, and that they can play a significant role in a world dominated or dominated in conversation, at least, by data centers and other things. So anyway, let's get into distributed energy resources, sometimes called distributed energy assets. This is me. I've been doing this a long time, since I got out of the Army a long time ago. I've done it a lot of ways and done it in a lot of places. I think my earliest start with distributed resources was as a commissioner around 1992 in Texas, when I helped launch a rulemaking for line extension policy. If you had a barn and you wanted to add light, we ordered utilities to provide information to customers saying, hey, Solar might be cheaper than stringing a wire a mile through your ranch. And I've been working on it a whole lot of other ways since then. My wife summarizes this career as he bores easily. All right, let me start with a vision thing because I don't think we do enough of this. For me, the vision here is, is not technology specific and not technology size specific. It's about getting clean energy access to everyone today and tomorrow. It's an energy justice theme. I'm not afraid to say it. It's a bias towards clean energy. It's a recognition of meeting today's needs and ensuring the future can meet their needs as well. We had a longer one when we created a plan for Texas that was the Texas Sustainable Energy Council that was formed under an executive order from Governor Ann Richards. It's the one in the middle there. It's got all the clauses. This was also done around 1992. But the simplest way to think about this, and the simplest and most compelling argument that I've found, is that we ought to live in our energy space and in all our spaces as if we really believe there'll be a tomorrow. Most people are good enough that they'll do the right thing if they believe there'll be a tomorrow. Of course, some people have a very short-sighted vision. That's a whole nother philosophical discussion. So let's talk about some assumptions that I bring to this conversation. So first of all, DERs, as I promised, is anything interconnected or operating at the distribution level. There's not a number thing here. It's not 10 megawatts or below, although some policies adopt that. It's not a specific thing that ends the market at a certain point. If it works at the distribution level, it's a distributed energy resource. Second assumption that I bring to this discussion is that net zero and then maybe even eventually zero fossil use as soon as technically possible is absolutely essential if we want to continue surviving on this planet. All of us, not just a few who can afford to buy a bubble. The curve is bending towards clean energy and zeroing out fossil use, but not fast enough. And it's not distributed equally, back to the justice thing. And then too many institutions and regulatory and policy regimes are inadequate to the task in front of us. They need help. They need to change. Unfortunately, a recent thing that I've added to my thinking about this is that short-term blind greed has been adopted as public policy, but here's hoping it doesn't last forever. Okay, so why do we want to talk about distributed energy resources? I'm going to get into the details of this, but let's think at a high level. What do we get if our resources are distributed? And we need to start with the definition of resources. Resources are things that provide value or help to solve problems or meet needs. And so when we have a problem or we have a need, we need to look for the available resources and decide what's the best deal. At Rocky Mountain Institute, when I was there, we summarized this very succinctly. Best buys should go first. And for all the reasons that I'm going to talk about in this presentation, I think distributed energy resources are often the best buy. However, it's important that I also clarify this is not an either or. One of the coolest things that distributed energy resources do is make utility scale central station resources work better. So ignoring distributed energy resources is cutting your nose off to spite your face. Relying on big system solutions, utility scale solutions, is under optimizing the system. So we want to take advantage of the value that these resources bring. So what do they bring? Well, they bring important value to the distribution system at a time when everybody's talking about gigawatt loads. You get locational security, reliability, and portfolio diversity value added to the grid if your utility knows how to measure it, or if they take the time to measure it, even if they know. Uh, it's also a really good way to bring market discipline to monopoly utilities. I don't believe in the canard that there's such a thing as a natural monopoly. I happen to be a free market guy who believes that Markets can bring efficiency to lots of systems. That's not unregulated markets, that's reasonably regulated markets with good governance at all scales. But we've moved a little too far to let monopolies do whatever they want to do and assume that what's good for the monopoly is good for us. Adding distributed energy resources into the game gives us price discipline, gives us customer satisfaction discipline, gives us the revelation of all the values that I just talked about, locational security, et cetera. So it's a good thing if you live in the largest, most successful free market democracy the world has ever known to try to temper the excesses of a monopoly industry, and DERs can help you do that. We can advance equitable access to sustainable energy. As I said earlier, there's a problem. The benefits are not being distributed equally. The opportunities are not being distributed equally, not even equitably, even if equally is not the answer. But distributed resources, because they work at the places where the highest value is, can actually migrate naturally to the places that are traditionally underserved. We can bring private capital. The money I'm going to spend if I get this solar system in before the end of the year is my money, but it's bringing a few kilowatts of generation to the system. Multiply that by millions of customers, and we've leveraged a huge investment opportunity. That's good when the utility model is based on spreading costs of utility scale investments to all customers, whether they like it or not. Basically, we take a little bit of the effort, we take a little bit of the load off, and that helps everybody. And then finally, the stuff I'm talking about is labor intensive, it's locally specific. You can really do good things for your community. So this is why we want to pursue distributed energy resources. Let's talk about how to get there. First, let me start by reminding you that it's not all doom and gloom. This is kind of an important thing to talk about these days because there's a lot of doom and gloom going on. But we have proof from some of the most sophisticated modeling that we've ever seen. And I'm talking about the local solar for all work with vibrant, clean energy, now owned by Pattern Energy, and the Wisdom P model. Just look up local solar for all and you can learn more if you don't know all about it. But we've learned by using advanced modeling, modeling that most utilities don't use, that coordinated optimization of DERs can actually achieve net zero carbon by 2050 at a savings of $1.5 trillion for the lower 48. Um, that's because, as I said before, DERs make central station work better. We are also learning that the negative zero and negative marginal cost prices of variable renewables means that it's starting to get smart to overbuild. We don't want to just build to meet our noontime demand. We want to build, we can afford to build to meet our 8 a.m. demand. It's cheaper to add kilowatts of solar to your roof than to build a power plant. And if you're already on the roof, adding one more kilowatt makes very little difference, marginal cost difference to the overall pricing of the investment. We should overbuild so that we have more of that good, clean energy to share all around the community. Third, we are learning that if you put monopoly utilities on performance diets, they can meet them and everyone can benefit. Fourth, I'm going to talk more about this later. We now have the tools to do quantitative as well as qualitative, but objective and disciplined benefit cost analysis of our resource options, and we should. Third, we're not the first to do this. Some high penetration states, California, Arizona, Hawaii, are finding innovative ways to ensuring that, well, Arizona maybe not, that the transition is accompanied by transformation. As states, the few states that are remaining who are pursuing really high renewable energy targets continue to work towards their goals, they're going to teach us all things that we can use. So we don't have to be first. We just have to not ignore the good lessons we're learning from other places. And then finally, aggregation is the superpower of distributed resources. Nobody has to go this alone. What you can do as a community, whether it's in one geographic area or spread across something like a utility service territory, is powerful. And there is power in numbers of small things. Let's just try any ecological example that you can imagine. There's a sweet spot between the customer and the 69 kVA bus, the substation that can be filled with aggregations and where needs can be satisfied by aggregations. And the conversations we're having about things like VPPs are really bringing that to light. Thank you to the DOE, or once upon a time, the DOE that was pushing that solution. How do we get there? Well, we're going to go over some of these things in more detail, but to sort of signal ahead for the big picture, the first thing we need to do is evaluate distributed resources by the costs they avoid. Because utilities are always looking what's the next marginal cost, what's the next investment they have to make. In order to make that decision intelligently, they have to know what are the options. And to know what are the options, we need transparent, fair, stable, net avoided cost value being provided to the options, just as well as we need utility revenues being applied to their solution if that's the most cost-effective option. We're doing that through value of solar, which I started at Austin Energy almost 15 years ago, and distributed energy resource benefit cost analysis. But it also involves getting everybody in the room. So it's not just an echo chamber between somebody who wants it one way and somebody who says, I guess that's what we have to go with. We need to broaden the circle so we get better answers. Second, we need to require the utilities to share their data. They run the system. We need to know simple things, maybe not so simple, but a simple thing to say. We need to know the marginal distribution capacity cost of the utility grid at the feeder level. Okay, a lot of geeky terms in that, but we basically need to know what's the cost of supplying the next unit of energy to my house. Because then we can know whether any of these distributed options are a better deal, and better buy should go first. We need to base our laws, rules, regulations on meaningful levels of market experience. Now, that doesn't mean assuming that 50% of the market is rooftop solar, because we don't have that anywhere. But it also means that we don't judge this thing by 0.05%, as they are trying to do in some states. We need to make sure that everything can connect. This needs to be a toll road where everybody can drive and you just pay by the number of axles that you're using. We need open access tariffs at the distribution level, just like we've proven work at the wholesale level. And we need the ability to physically and technically interconnect in a way that recognizes the very real, but often greatly exaggerated cost of interconnecting these resources to the grid. Somehow we need to get utilities to be willing to experiment. I think performance-based regulation approaches would really help on that. We need to learn by doing. Another thing that would really help is something I started way long time ago, again, another 15 years ago, a sandbox idea. When we created the Pecan Street project at what looks exactly like Central Park, because it was the same developer, we did it in Austin. We created a space where we could try out new ideas and distributed resources, and the utility and the technology companies and the customers could all cooperate in trying to figure out, again, where are those best bargains. And then we need to work on rules of disposition of RECs and other attribute associated claims. Hopefully, we can get by this recent attack on renewable energy certificates that was launched by a number of, let's just, well, let's just call them over politicized states. Whole nother conversation as well. So that's how we get to do that. How can we get to some, how do we get there? Well, keep the end in mind. We want to be fair to everybody. We want to be fair to the utility. We want to be fair to non-utility customers. We want to ensure that compensation, that you get paid for what you do, and how we work this out has to be intuitively sound and administratively simple. Basically, no Greek letters and formulas to the public. We might need them at our level, but we can't make our arguments based on that. So where do we start? Well, let's start by valuing solar. That's where I started back in 2010. I said, I don't need to know what it costs. I need to know what it's worth. The little story there is at Austin Energy, we kept getting approached by companies who said, we want to build some solar for you. Austin's supposed to be friendly to solar. We could do an RFP, a request for proposals. We could find out who was the lowest bidder, but we didn't know if any of those bids made sense. We didn't know if the lowest bid was a good deal. So we hired Clean Power Research to tell us what the value of solar would be. That all happened 6 years before I even got to Austin Energy. But when I got there, I was running a rebate program for rooftop solar that was busting its budget every 6 months because the prices of solar were falling so dramatically. I said, I can't chase this thing with rebates. And it frustrates my customers if it's $4 today and $3 tomorrow and $1 after that. And by the way, they're down to zero now. What I need to know is what's it worth to bring solar onto the system? What is the customer bringing to me if they invest? And I said, hey, we've been valuing solar with our analysis for larger scale stuff. Why don't we use that as the way to value what a customer does to us? Treat them like a resource, an alternative to buying wholesale power. So we used the value stack method that Clean Power Research developed: energy, capacity, ancillary services, problem avoidance, all those other things that became the value of solar value stack. Well, what could we use it for? Well, we used it to index compensation. Instead of paying rebates, I paid customers the value of solar for both their injected and their offset energy, because their exported energy was helping everybody else. But when they offset their own energy, they were actually helping me avoid, or the rest of the utility, avoid an energy purchase and sale. It allows us to be fair in our tariff designs. It helps boost markets for that private investment. Animating DER markets, the term we used in the New York Rev proceeding that I played in for 5 years. It's good for as a background for benefit cost assessment as an analysis, as I'm going to get to. It targets the best prices for non-wires solutions. And by the way, just in case you're prone to this, some people call these non-wires alternatives, but that acronym was already taken in Compton, and it's not a good acronym anyway, so we talk non-wires solutions. And then finally, it gets a start on framing energy justice initiatives. Another reason to know what's it worth and to who, for what purpose. That's valuing solar. So that analytical approach is based on asking some interesting questions, like the very simple one, right? If the utility had to give me a unit of solar or solar equivalent electricity, what would they charge me? I'm going to pause for a minute. Think about all the green power programs you've seen. If you went to the utility and said, I want a kilowatt hour of solar or solar equivalent electricity delivered to my house, what would they charge you? What would it be worth? Well, that's what they should be paying you if you make it yourself. To get into this analysis more deeply, a little philosophical, but with really big practical implications, we need to understand that price, cost, and value are not the same thing. We pay an awful lot of money and waste an awful lot of national income on stuff that isn't worth very much. And a whole lot of the things that are most important to us come at no price at all. Like the love of these puppies that just climbed onto the couch behind me. Um, we need to remember, recognize, and treat fairly the fact that distributed energy resource investors, like investors in solar, are providing valuable, privately funded, low or no greenhouse gas electricity at or very near the point of use. That bundles up that value stack, right? What's it worth there? And then we learn through doing value solar analysis all these things, these components that are in the value stack that I just mentioned. But even at a very high level, when I contributed to the writing of a book at Rocky Mountain Institute called Small is Profitable a long time ago, it's more than 20 years ago, we learned that when you take a fair accounting of all the value that distributed resources bring, they're twice the utility value of electricity and can be 10 times their cost if we account for all the benefits they bring fairly and objectively. Small is profitable is now free. Now, if you want to find it, just Google small is profitable and RMI will give it to you. Don't read the policy section, it's out of date, but all the rest of it is pretty good. I mentioned this before. Another thing we've done lately, and this is starting in 2002, 2020, I'm sorry. Why did I say 2002? 2020, we published the National Standard Practice Manual for Benefit Cost Analysis of Distributed Resources. For those of you who know it, California 40 years ago published the benefit cost test, but then told everybody they had to use one or maybe two, but they had to use them exactly as California wrote them. And you can imagine how well that works to tell everybody they have to use the California solution. Well, after 40 years of practice, a group of us got together and realized we learned enough that we could actually write a national standard practice manual, not a California practice manual, and that we could give jurisdictions the freedom to craft benefit cost analysis framework solutions for their jurisdiction. So we came out with a process. By the way, we're updating the manual as we speak. Hopefully, you'll see it in the early part of next year. Most of the major principles, all the major principles remain the same. We've shuffled a few things, but it provides a disciplined approach to establishing a jurisdiction-specific test for conducting benefit cost analysis of distributed energy resources. It's a framework. And by the way, if you do it right, you can use it for a whole bunch of things. You can use it for distributed storage and building electrification and electric vehicles and all the other distributed resource evaluations you want to conduct. It takes account, first and foremost, of jurisdictional policy. So nobody can say California is being crammed down their throat. We're doing this uniquely for Michigan, uniquely for Maryland, uniquely for Virginia. You get the point. And it goes through these steps, like figuring out what do you care about, what are you going to evaluate it, and then with 300 plus pages of useful information, we tell you how to reach the formulas for each of those valuation steps. I'm going to keep moving here. Yeah, because we're getting close. These I'm going to go through really quickly. These bubblish charts are in the National Standard Practice Manual, and we broke down the important thing to see here is the impact categories. This is really what it takes to do a fair value stack: generation, transmission, distribution, and general benefits. And these are utility system benefits only, and they need to be evaluated every time you're talking about whether utility is changing a rate, making investment, fighting against, fighting for, whatever. these things need to come out. The color coding tells you that for energy efficiency, demand response, distributed generation, storage, and electrification initiatives, how it usually starts as a benefit or a cost, or it comes out as it depends. Updating all of these again, but we can richly and robustly evaluate these resources. And this is just on the utility side. If we go a little bit further, we'll find out that, wait a minute, how it affects customers also matters. So there's all kinds of customer benefits. And this is important when customers are doing the investment. What are they paying? What do they have to pay for interconnection? How does this affect their perception of risk, reliability, resilience? The picture that always comes to my mind is when Winter Storm Uri hit Texas, and there was that one house in the subdivision that had porch lights on because they shut down the grid. But that guy, that couple, that family had solar and storage, and everybody went to their porch to charge their phones. There's value there that actually turns out to be social as well as individual. And okay, there used to be tax incentives, but all right, we won't get political. We also have societal benefits that we need to account for if we're really trying to understand. And by the way, I just want to deal with one little thing quickly. A lot of utilities will argue, well, it's a utility cost, but it's not a societal cost. As far as I know, most utilities have a monopoly. So if you're a taxpayer, you're a utility customer. If you're a utility customer, you're a citizen. The difference between society and utility customers is zero or very little. So these things matter. And most states that look at this say, yeah, we should evaluate these societal costs as well as the host customer cost, as well as, of course, the utility cost. Okay, again, not going into this in detail allows us to go faster, but more of this is available at the NSPM, which is free for downloading. What happens if we do this right? Well, if we do this right, according to studies conducted by SEIA, I'm not just SEIA, this is Electrify America. If you do it right and you do it objectively, the red is bigger than the blue. That means that the value of solar that is revealed by objective analysis exceeds the retail rate. The differences down here at this end are the studies that were conducted exclusively by utilities or by analysts like E3 that basically just do utility work for them. Everything else shows values that exceed the cost. Why wouldn't you do this as your investment? And then finally, let me point out that all this stuff about valuing solar and doing benefit cost analysis for solar steps into all those other places that we try to reach to in the NSPM. So there's four more S's in VOS. There's value of storage, value of smarts, all the stuff we invest in to make the grid work better, value of security, the distribution grid that is immune from some of the threats and hazards that we're imposing on it, and the value of savings, just figuring out how to do this at lower cost. Okay, that's my high level, very fast overview of valuing DERs right. I get to say thank you. These are my connection points. Oh, I just took down my website because it's no longer useful to me, but hey, there it goes. I'll leave the slideshow up in case somebody wants to go back to another slide with a question. But Peter, let's get into some questions and answers.
Okay, sounds great. Okay, thanks for the presentation, Carl. It seems the other side of the problem is not only valuing DERs correctly, but pricing the grid correctly. For example, the cost to build and maintain a feeder will vary depending on how far from the central grid the feeder is located, yet the price is the same at all points on the utilities grid. Can you envision a scenario where utilities price grid services based on actual costs, not wire subsidies and cost shifts, allowing DERs to compete in a more free market environment?
Yeah, wow, what a brilliant question. Um, so yes, a premise of so a couple of geeky things here, right? There used to be a term we used called universality. So once upon a time we said, gee, We should extend telephone lines through not just urban, but also rural communities. Why? I don't know anybody in a farm. Why should I call them? And the answer was, well, here's the thing. It's not just so that the farmer can call the doctor, but so that the doctor can answer the question and say, hey, sounds like you have a cold. Take 2 aspirins and call me tomorrow. And society is better off because the doctor doesn't have to drive all the way to the farm to give 2 aspirins to the farmer. There are benefits from us all being networked. So maintaining the network is absolutely valuable, and paying for the network in a way that makes it affordable for everybody is good. It's a principle behind Social Security. Let's keep that. It's a principle behind the telephone system and now cellular networks. It's a principle behind the electric grid. But that doesn't mean we shouldn't encourage people to extract value by attacking high cost areas. That's the premise behind something we call transactive energy systems. The ability for me to say, hey, neighbor, I'm going on vacation for a month. My electricity use is going to be really low, but I've got solar panels. Would you like to buy my solar instead of me having to sell it to the utility marking it up and selling it back to you? So we absolutely should encourage transactions, robust transactions at the small level, but we can't do that until we know the value of the grid and each of those transactions. That's why I said the first thing we need is for utilities to understand the marginal distribution capacity cost at the feeder level. What is it worth for the utility to have to or not have to send 1 more kilowatt hour from a remote power plant through the transmission system, through the substation, through the distribution system, with all those transformer and line losses? What if Carl just said, I'll turn off a light and you can have the one I wasn't using? We need transparent posting of prices. We need friction-free market opportunities. And we can do that if we can encourage and empower customers to be transactive customers. Last thing I'll say on that is a few years ago, some of us put our words down in models for the utility system in an exercise that SEPA, then it was the Smart Electric Power Association. Now it's kind of just a utility conflict group. But anyway, if you look up the presentations for what we called the 51st state, a bunch of us got together and designed a utility system that would work in a new state that wasn't burdened by the history of what we did before. And Jim Kennerly and I and Tom Stanton, I think, helped, although maybe I'm not supposed to say that because he was at NRI at the time. But at any rate, we put together a 51st state scenario, and so did John Wellinghoff. He put together one, and we were number 1 and 2 in the rankings, and we were all about transactive energy systems. So, brilliant question. We can move in that direction. I think one of the ways to get utilities to adopt it would be to start looking at performance-based regulation that rewards utilities for something that I called distributed energy asset utilization. How effectively are they taking advantage of those distributed energy assets? And we laid that concept out in Illinois a few years ago, but I gladly share more information with other people.
Great. Next question. CRES recently had one of our policy committee members do a presentation. It's Jim Gilbert, and who argued for the creating of sustainability hubs. I think it was more in the microgrid fashion. Could you talk about this concept, if you're aware of it, and how it would fit into the value stack?
Yeah, so that's a perfect plug into the aggregation point that I was saying before, right? Smart aggregation is a microgrid. And the thing that people who kind of surf by the issue ignore is that all microgrids stay interconnected and are in an interconnected state 99.99% of the time. right? Utilities do run pretty reliable grids, very reliable grids. We got to give them credit, right? The lights stay on. That means that a system designed for really good power, really high quality power, really efficient use of energy, that's what a microgrid is able to export high value resources 99% of the time. So yes, it's another transactive energy opportunity, but it also requires that micro granular understanding of the grid. This shows up every time a utility has a grid constraint. I remember when, you know, the utility Central and Southwest put in 7 megawatts of storage in the Presidio in Texas because building a line was a much more expensive solution. Microgrid analysis will reveal that for you, will get investments that can add resilience but can contribute most of the time. And then just to stick this in your head, because Peter and I, a different Peter and I, were talking about this around microgrids years ago. Now imagine the power of a microgrid of one. It's what I'm trying to do at my house. I got my lightning, I'm getting my solar panels, I've added efficiency, I program my thermostats. If I can get a generator transfer switch, I become a microgrid of one in my 1886 house in downtown Denver. That's that's the game, right? Or I could join in with the 60 unit apartment building 2 houses down, and then we could really be powerful. And I could get past the fact that Excel maintains a lousy 2 pole 108 220 transformer to connect my house. That's a private pet peeve, but I cannot believe it's still the case.
Okay, next question
Sorry,
here.
sorry. That's why my interconnection to my solar has taken so long.
Um, how are you distributing the information you just presented? Is that what commoncharge.org is about, or taking it to the PUCs and legislative regulatory bodies around the country?
Great question. So first of all, NSPM, which is put out through E for the Future, and is absolutely free. Our methods and manuals thing is free. We have been invited into more than a dozen states to teach them and help them go through the process of adopting this. So on benefit cost analysis, we're going crazy on that. I am frequently asked to speak about value of solar, and I'm happy to share my experience. It was a pivotal experience in my life. You know, when I started it 15 years ago, war stories abound, but they're kind of like at solar beers meetings. But uh, finally, I personally do a ton of expert witness work, just not in Colorado, because I sit on the board of the Colorado Electric Transmission Authority and I don't want any conflicts. But I've provided testimony on these issues in dozens of states, and there are advocates who are getting together and hiring mouthpieces, voices, and experts to get involved in the conversations. And there's funding out there for them. I work with organizations like Earth Justice and Energy Law and Policy Center and Southern Environmental Law Center, and there is funding that wants to make this story told, and I'm a regulatory geek, so I take it to regulatory proceedings. But there's also, I should say, there's also all the people that I cite to in my testimony. There's work from UCS, and I was just reading some great stuff from them today. There's energy innovation. I start every morning just reading through the news feeds, Utility Dive, Canary, Media, Energy Central. I skim through those and find out who's doing what. And there's a lot of people trying to keep doing this. So that's a good way to also kind of keep up with it.
Okay. Next question here. What do you think about the small nuclear reactors that are being developed?
Well, first, I'm all over the place on this, right? So first of all, we've been doing small nuclear reactors, right, on submarines and aircraft carriers. And it's a really great option when you're willing to take your old reactor and drop it into the ocean and hope nothing bad happens for the next 50 or 100 years. That's how they dispose of Navy nuclear reactors. Okay, so we've another story. When I first arrived at the Department of Energy, I had the chance to run all the R&D programs for renewable energy at DOE many years ago. And at the same time, the nuclear office was trying to get, why am I blanking on the name? Uh, the, the storage place in Nevada, where they were going to put all the nuclear waste.
Yucca Mountain.
Thank you, Yucca Mountain. And they're trying to move forward on Yucca Mountain. And one of the things they did was publish in the Federal Register a request for proposals on what signs to use. And what signs to use? Yeah, because this stuff is toxically radioactive for 10,000 years, and we don't have languages that old. I mean, what are you going to do? Put up a skull and crossbones? What if pirates become the popular social meme in 500 years? They'll all go there and die. We don't have the words, the signs. We don't have a way to tell people that this is going to be poisonous for 10,000 years. Finally, I note by following the news, I'm sorry, one other side thing. I, I'm one of the few people alive who's actually voted to put a nuclear power plant into rates as a public utility commissioner. Comanche Peak was approved at 750 million. It went in at 12.5 billion, a 17 times cost overrun. Vogel is even worse. 10 billion went up to 35 billion. And those commissioners just have been soaking the customers to pay for that all along the way. And that's the point I was really getting to. Even the news stories about modular nukes today say that no company can get off the ground unless they can get an order for 10 or 20 of them. It's because the cost of development are so high. Here's what I think modular nukes are good for. Check the current price and do anything that's cheaper. And if you're really trying to save money, you're going to do solar, you're going to do wind, you're going to do geothermal in Western Colorado, you're going to do efficiency and energy management. The best buys should go first. But keep researching the modular nukes and update the price for me so I know what price I need to beat. Other than that, don't put your thumb on the scale. Do what's best, most cost effective.
Okay. Next question. Let's see. Um, Question from our founder, Ron Larson. Thanks for the nice talk. Because I now work mostly on CDR, carbon dioxide removal, and specifically biochar, I'd appreciate your thoughts on how electric utility customers could be helping remove CO2, not by not using a fossil resource, but actually helping the utilities with their removal obligations. How would you do that?
Yeah, that's a tough one, right? Because you take off the table the best solution, which is just stop using fossil fuels. But he's not taking it off the table. He's saying what's next after that, in addition to that. And there's an honesty in what Ron says, which is we've got a whole lot of utilities across this country saying, oh, data centers are coming. We need to burn more fossil fuel. And they're making 60 and 70-year investments in fossil fuel plants, and they're going to want to run them. So actually, as I think about it, I said it wrong. Ron's asking the right question. If we don't discipline ourselves to get off fossil fuels, then how do we get rid of the carbon? Um, I'm not really happy in trying to create markets around it, but plants do a really good job of sequestering carbon if we manage it smart and don't manage it for the money. There's been some bad stuff done, but there's still a whole lot of regreening and maintaining greening that we could do. After that, wow. Um, I know there are some processes for sequestering carbon dioxide. I know that there are caverns that we can pump it in. I trust none of the caverns, but I know that it's very popular. Um, I'm gonna have to defer to the experts and tell you what I don't think works. What I don't think works is tax credits, especially tax credits that require you to only prove sequestration for 3 years or whatever that short-term number is, right? If you're going to give somebody a tax credit for sequestering carbon, then figure out how to put them on the hook for the entire period of time that it's supposed to be sequestered. Don't just kick the can down the road with a 3 or 5 year sequestration obligation and have the guys launder their tax credits and move on. But that should be the next talk, right?
Yeah, we could. I'm sure we'll be visiting that one again.
Okay.
So next question, back a little bit back on topic here. Colorado's distribution system planning and VPP aggregation cases are being decided now. Can
Yes.
you visualize how to capture and leverage the full DER value stack to underwrite community-owned VPP aggregations?
Yeah, I think Colorado might have a leg up on a lot of other places. Even though we don't have a lot of these resources installed, we do have some processes. So I would look to our IRP process that had to go through a lot of work to get to the point where, you know, we're pretty comfortable with the way Excel does RFPs for its resource planning. And then we get a pretty fair evaluation of the options. Um, so that means we need to just take that down a level. And one of the things I learned when I managed R&D is that making things smaller is a lot harder than making things bigger, right? Making it work at a micro scale. But we need to figure out how to do this planning, iterate on this planning, have us not just default to old solutions, but to actually, try out the alternatives. I mentioned sandboxes before. I think they're a greatly underutilized resource, a regulatory sandbox where the utility can say, okay, I heard you. I'm going to try to do this solution. I'm going to go to Central Park. All the houses are the same vintage. They were all built in the same time period. There's thousands of people living there. Let's deploy DERs aggressively in that place and learn how to do it. And by the way, let's also do it in, you know, Loveland. Let's also do it in Longmont. Let's also do it, in other places and try these ideas out. So we need to not only do more granular planning as these dockets are trying to do, but we need to go forward with these BPP ideas and try them out and not worry if they fail. By the way, VPPs is one of those words that nobody means the same thing when they say it. So I'll just tell you what I mean. I mean a VPP is basically any aggregation of multiples of one DER, roughly speaks. So that's a lot of storage or a lot of solar or whatever. Some people are trying to do solar coupled with storage, but those hybrid systems are essentially just one, and they're grouping together a bunch of those. There's a much harder case out there which deals with multiple DERs, having energy management, demand response, storage, energy efficiency, and local generation, and running those all in that microgrid of one kind of configuration. But we need to try that too. Again, I also said the economic solutions. We got to post the prices. The utilities got to post the price, let people come to the market and say, I can do it. Aggregators will do that for them. Firms like, I mean, I can't even remember all of them, but in 2010, when I was at Austin Energy, I had 75% of all residential thermostats under my control. 95 yeah, it was, yeah, 75% of all of them. I could pull 25 megawatts anytime I wanted. And We saved money for a year if we avoided our transmission charges on the 4 peak days that ERCOT gave us. So um, aggregations like that can be done. They can be done by the utility, or they can be done by agents for the utility. We could also go, one of the things we did when our technology expired on the thermostat controls is we invented a concept that you may have heard about called bring your own device. And we said, here's what you have to do to have a device, a thermostat that's compliant with the Austin Energy system. If you meet these specs, you can play, and we don't even have to run it anymore. We'll send the signal and you respond, or your aggregator responds. So most of this stuff has been tried. We just have to have the willpower to do it.
Okay. If you could, what would you do and change at Excel? That's a big one.
Um, I I don't know how we stop having the problems without moving aggressively towards performance-based regulation. We have to break the back, and I grew up on the back of it. I make money knowing how this works, but cost plus regulation, like the Defense Department, make a more expensive fighter jet, and that's how you make money. The cost plus model for the utility system was a great way to get a grid built in the 1900s. We're not trying to do that anymore. So we don't have to do it all at once, but as many functions as we can put on a performance metric. The easy stuff is transmission. Next down comes generation. The hard stuff is going to be distributed services, but we can do it. And we can even start at the bottom with reliability. Most states that toy with performance-based regulation start there as well. But we have to, this is one of my mantras that just now is kind of seems passe or old fashioned, but we've spent before this last crazy year, we spent all these years talking about the transition, but we didn't spend enough time talking about the transformation. The transition is getting off carbon. Economics is going to do that for us. Rational thinking is going to do that for us. So as soon as we stop the irrational thinking, I think the transition is well in hand. But if we don't transform the way utility services are provided, then we will never solve the problems that continue to vex us. So anything we can put on a performance basis, we need to do it. We need to peel those off until maybe there's one core function that really should run as a monopoly, maintaining the distribution wires, but everything else can be run on a performance basis. And if you run it on a performance basis, you can invite competition and alternative providers. And by the way, you could actually jack up the profits so that the shareholders of current Excels and other monopoly utilities are making more money than they did before, even with a shrunken rate base. Right now, the only way they make more money is to grow the rate base, but with performance, we can shrink the rate base and afford to pay them higher margins. That's the win-win if we go towards a performance-based system.
Fantastic. Next question here. Are tariffs throwing the cost benefit calc so far off to have or to change the NSPM conclusions or standards?
Let me put it this way. A lot of tariffed rates do not reflect the value. So they either have to be compensated for in one direction or another, or at least we have to understand why they deviate from the objective value. So, for example, you can pay a lot more for getting community solar to low-income customers. We do that with low-income set-asides and community solar programs in a lot of places, right? And the credits they receive are higher than the credits that maybe other investors would. But that's a policy choice. We said what we'd like is that the other community solar customers will help low income customers get higher credits, and that's going to reduce uncollectible rates and default rates, and it's going to keep people with an essential service. And we make that decision. We make that decision when we provide support for low-income bill assistance. We do it with LIHEAP through our federal tax dollars until the current administration cuts that too. We make decisions like that, and we've made decisions to do things like encourage rooftop solar by having high rates or rebates, right? Like I described when I was at Austin Energy. What we should recognize, though, is being explicit about what we're doing. So, for example, economic development rates that pay data centers to add load that they would add anyway and give them incentives that we all have to pay through subsidies might not be a good use of tariff dollars. And economic development rates are in tariffs too. So just know what we're doing, right? We still provide a deduction for home mortgages. We use rates and tax rates and all sorts of things to make things happen. What we should do is pay for the things we want and not just pay for the things we've always paid for because that's how we've done it. And we sure as hell shouldn't be doing it just because a few people with lots of campaign contribution dollars buy their way into friendly policy. NSPM at least gives us the potential of an objective benefit cost analysis framework that makes those subsidies explicit. And sunlight, it's good for rooftops and it's good for policy.
Okay. Do you have some specific recommendations for Colorado?
No,
At this point, we are now about 50% renewables. As fast as things are changing, VOS studies, value of solar, I'm assuming, more than a year or two old, are often obsolete and extremely site and time specific.
the governor has done me the honor of appointing me twice to the board of the Colorado Electric Transmission Authority. And we have a plan. We've figured out from the large scale on the transmission side what we need to do in order to help make our policy goals of 100% renewable energy achieved. We don't mess around in distributed energy resources. All my general recommendations apply everywhere. I would tell, anybody here all the things I'm telling about distributed resources, but I don't meddle, I don't get involved in that policy because by virtue of my appointment, um, my work is focused on the CETA work, the Electric Transmission Authority. So um, I'll leave it to the good people, Tom Plant, I know, Eric Blank, I know, those two commissioners I know very well. I don't know the third commissioner, but those are smart people. And I know that the utilities have smart people and the munis have smart people and the advocates have smart people. So I know they can get to this. And you can look at any of my public statements and use any of them you want to. I just won't be carrying them in.
Okay. Um, Do you see plug and play solar becoming a common part of everyday energy use in the United States? And I'm assuming that's the plug-in panels that
Yeah,
that they're doing in apartment buildings in Germany and whatnot.
I got
Correct me if I'm wrong, anonymous attendee who asked that
Yeah,
question.
but no. But I think it's what are they called balcony solar too.
Yeah, yeah,
The
yeah.
idea. I I was fascinated with this when we at Department of Energy we helped support some of the first solid state, panel sized inverters, right, and micro inverters. I'm not an engineer, but I didn't see why you wouldn't be able to just put an outlet plug on it and stick it in your wall and just reduce your usage because I can do that with those gimme throwaway solar panels, that I plug into my little USB device and it charges the battery, and then I put my phone on it and I have solar supplemental on top of it. I can, all that's possible, right? As long as the solid state electrical keeps me from an unsafe situation. Okay, so I'm not speaking to the safety of plugging, hundreds of, or hundreds of watts of solar into your porch outlet. It might not be the right thing to do. Okay, so don't do it because I say it. But um, these guys are so smart. Yeah, this if something's begging to be vernacular, why not hang a solar panel on your balcony? And you don't have to own the roof. You can get a few watts, and if it keeps it from doing the wrong thing on the circuitry and it meets codes and standards, I I love it. I think being subversive about this is the strength of being distributed. Now, boy, that's going to get me in trouble, but that's okay. Bottoms up
Well, we need
solutions.
the legislation first, and I think UL needs to get behind it too. But
Okay, yeah,
we're
yeah,
we're
good.
actually talking to some of those folks pushing that
Yay.
at our policy level. So it's coming. So next question here. DOE seems to now be saying solar is a mature industry that deserves no government support. Please comment. What do you suggest is a non-government way forward?
Um, well, and there's lots of non-federal ways forward, right? People are gonna have to get creative about financing. People are gonna have to get active democratically, involve themselves in the system, participate in the regulatory processes, not just count on people to do the right thing. Um, the the presumption that this tiny segment, especially distributed solar, this tiny segment of the national energy picture is somehow achieved scale and 100% market viability is just is ignorant, right? It's ignorant. Incumbent advantage is real. And the only people who would say incumbents don't have advantage is people who want to protect the incumbent advantage. So I don't buy it. It's not real. It's not even a good use of the DOE. The purpose of the Department of Energy used to be that there was a party that would tell us that they should be doing experimentation and research and development of new resources that can help us out, not protecting the incumbents. So that, like many things else, and I was a DOE that did that. So, I speak from my position, and I'm a guy who got told by certain members of Congress that I wasn't, that it was only supposed to be basic research and innovation and non-majority markets, and we weren't supposed to subsidize the majorities. That's gotten flipped. I get that that's the new, real politic, but DOE has lost its way, and we have to learn to live without them. And we can do that at the state level where we control the political processes. And I'm not moving from Colorado because I think it's a good place to be.
Okay. Excel Energy quickly maxed out its battery rebate programs this year. What kind of PUC intervention or policy tool could we realistically advocate for to get utilities to better fund their battery programs?
Cost effectiveness analysis, benefit cost analysis. That's it. Do it transparently, do it objectively, do it comprehensively. See what the numbers tell you. Don't trust them. Don't trust anybody. Don't trust me. Run the numbers.
All right. Um, Back to the VPP. Could a VPP aggregation per SB 2018 operate as a local energy market, LEM, that allows buying and selling with the neighbors at the retail level, aka a solar farmers market?
I don't see why not. That's the vision of the transactive energy market. Post a price, the system posts a price. If you can beat it and arrange a transaction, even if you have to pay the transaction cost, And if it comes below, you beat the transaction price. Yes, there's no reason why not. We do this all the time. I make instantaneous trades on money market funds or whatever it is, CDs. We could do this for electricity. Um, so yes, and it might be easier to run it at relatively small levels or at a bus between like a PCC, a point of common connection between a microgrid and the rest of the grid, and start it there. Say, okay, here's a gateway. We got 10 megawatts behind this plus storage in the microgrid. We got a PCC and we got a utility. Post the price there. Use an API to designate, and indicate the transactions. Start those transactions and then get smaller as you get better at it. And eventually, I'm trading stocks on my iPhone.
Okay, next question here. Are you talking about moving toward a distribution system operator model? If so, what can we do in Colorado to move closer to that than we have already tried?
Yeah, you know, um, the thing to do, yes, I am sort of. I think a distribution system operator is a good idea. I think it should probably be separate from a utility system operator because you'll just self-deal if you're the one and the same. It's just too tempting. So you need to delaminate and disintermediate, words we had from the old, the original internet boom. So how do we get there? You peel off everything that can be run on a performance or competitive basis, increment by increment, right? You just take each layer off as it can stand alone, or you support it while it learns to stand alone. Um, you know, let's remember, it used to be that we counted on utilities to tell us about light bulbs. And we went through compact fluorescence with them. And then they did some help on LEDs. They should probably still be doing some because people are still burning stupid ones. But by and large, we've moved the market for efficient lighting out of the utility space. They're still useful for going to the places where there's no market that's viable. That was the philosophy that we adopted with the reforming the energy vision in New York. Utility monopolies should perform where there's not a viable market. But dang it, this is America. We should be able to figure out how to do markets in lots of other places. We've we've done it. We can keep doing it and just get deeper and deeper and deeper until what's left is the distribution system operator who's agnostic. As long as the system runs reliably, is agnostic from who they buy it from, whether themselves or someone else. They shouldn't even have the option to buy it from themselves.
Okay, I think I've got just one or two questions left.
Good.
One is,
Good
have you
questions,
been
though.
following Ember Energy, the think tank out of the UK, I believe, and their promotion of the concept of the age of electrotech, especially relative to places like Africa and Asia, where they're seeing, much of the energy action is all DER and solar.
No, but now I'm gonna go look for that. I did get involved in that. When I worked for AES, we ran the distribution company in Cameroon. We had a grid expansion target, and the only cost-effective way, this was 20 years ago, was with distributed resources. So, and I remember when I was at DOE, Solar Electric Light Fund pioneered some of these same ideas. It's easier to hand out a solar-powered lantern than to try to connect a grid. You do have to be socially aware and understand how people are organized and where money is made and how it's transacted. But things like cell phones and stuff have made it work. Um, I think they can leapfrog our obsessive compulsion towards central grids. And I would look to the great work that, Homer, uh, Lilienthal did with island microgrids and just borrow it. Lowenthal, Lilienthal, right? Anyway,
Yep,
yes,
yep, you got
Lilienthal.
it.
Yep.
Yeah, I know up here I'm up in Fort Collins, and we had a lot of action out of the powerhouse, the Energy Institute, and
Yeah.
those types of initiatives. Husk Power, I think, is still kicking
Yeah,
around. So a lot of good stuff and a lot of opportunity. Yeah, for them to avoid all
right.
this CapEx.
Now, you could do it in Walt Burbclaves, the suburban enclaves that, you could do that right around here. We were doing that in Texas 20 years ago. You know, you've got aggregations, just make them work for everybody in the aggregation without, doing selfish misallocations of system costs and stuff. Whole data center conversation. Oh my
Yeah.
gosh. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure we'll be having that as a topic in the coming year as
Oh
well.
gosh,
So,
I will tell you, I do a guest spot on a podcast about data centers and energy, and I just started 3 days ago, just collecting the news items of the day, and I'm up to like 6 pages, and I mean it's making sense of it all. Oh my gracious,
and what's really going to happen versus what's
yeah,
speculatory.
yeah, yeah. The Phantom stuff, the gaming that is going on, and then people acting like the gaming that's going on is real. Oh, come on. We know better. Yeah, but I get paid to not know better.
All right. Well, it looks like we're at the end of the questions. Carl, I want to thank you. Oh, okay, one more.
Oh,
Okay,
one more.
last one from James. Is there still more legislation we need to help CETA do the job the state originally intended? So a nice.
Yeah, well, budget would be nice, but we're going to work on that. And it's tough, so I'm not going to be greedy. Um, there might be, right now, we have a really good law. They wrote us a really good law. It's brilliant. And it just, the structure of CETA is just I mean, it's one of the most innovative and smart things I've seen in state governance. And we bought a lot from New Mexico, so giving them credit, but we did it even better. Um, so I think we're good for now, but we need to do a couple of projects and find out where we're lacking. One thing I will tell you, during my confirmation hearing, one senator said, well, I wish you didn't have eminent domain. And I don't, and I said, Senator, look, I don't ever want to use it, but if we don't have it, we can't, if it's not sitting there, we can't have serious conversations about developing these transmission assets. So I think we're good there. We have the right spirited people who, we're not going to go bulldozing over the state of Colorado to get this done. The first thing we did was adopt stakeholder engagement principles that'll apply to developers and to us as a developer. So I think the short answer is, I think we're in good shape, but let's watch and see what we need to do as we move forward, because I don't know what's laying behind the log. If somebody wants to mess with it, or if we find ourselves stymied by something. And by the way, this is Karl speaking as Karl. There's a whole board of people um, that sort through these problems, and boy, do I get to work with some amazing folks on the board of CETA. So, but I, I think that this has potential for really helping us overcome a systemic problem with the utility scale grid, which is, sort of objectively analyzing what is the transmission we need, where should we go, how do we get it done. Um, I think everybody will want to be a part of something good. So I'm counting on that as the outcome, and in a few years we'll celebrate success.
Okay, sounds great. Well, Carl, thanks again, and thank everyone for joining. You will get a follow-up email tomorrow from Zoom with a link to the recording. And if you have any questions or want a copy of the slides, email me at info@crest-energy.org. All right.
Thanks, everybody. What a great time.
All right. Thank you, Carl. Everyone have a great evening.
Cheers.